Hello people, this is Big Bad Wolf here, and this is introduction. We're heading towards the World War I days, but first we're picking up my friend Bill and my friend Brandon. It's my dad. It is 9 in the morning. I don't know, I'm weird. Anyway. I'll see you guys soon when I pick up Bill and Brandon, and I'll probably just have a conversation with them until we get near the World War I reenactment area, and then I'll film the next part. See you guys soon.
Alrighty then.
So we made it to the Midway village of World War I. And now here we go. We're gonna go inside. I'll meet you guys inside. Probably film when there's like a fight about to happen and stuff and all that stuff, but before then we'll see you soon. Yeah. Yeah, I did. So the good thing is I can record a lot more this time because my camera actually has better batteries than the last camera. Yeah, that too. Oh, this is what the battlefield looks like currently.
Oh, see, now it's not a store anymore. It's just a
they
warehouse.
Switched it.
Yeah, it's a warehouse. Yeah.
Probably switched it for the World War I. Blacksmith. Bing, bing, bing. Oh, look at them all at that house over there.
Yep. What?
House over there. They're all standing in line.
Is that? I think that's Russians.
Music.
That's old. You can tell. We are, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a, there's going to be a main battlefield soon, so we're going to record that pretty soon. Other than that, we're going to be walking around and filming. Nice. World War I rifles.
You got the big bayonets on the end too.
Yeah, that one. Those two do. Well, look at that guy on the Jeep. He had like a machine gun on it. That's not World War I. What's that doing here? What is that thing?
Oh, look at that old plane.
We're still unloading here. If you got questions, go ahead and ask them.
All right.
My question is, what is that thing? What is that doing in that era?
If they'd had it, they would have used it.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's funny, I got that on video. Oh man. Yeah, just like nowadays they probably would use like the firearms we have, obviously. That is a cool tank, yeah.
Tank and the plane.
Yeah. Is that actually real? Or is that just a replica thing? That's what I figured. It's really cool.
It's a replica. They don't have very many of those planes left.
Yeah, I can only imagine why. Because it's old.
It's cool.
Anyways, guys, I'm going to stop filming for now. And then I'll film again when we get onto the main battlefield, or if there's something else that interesting that happens. Also, if you're watching my video, check out Bill's channel. Cool Pony. I'll put his link in the description. Make sure you also subscribe to his channel. See you guys soon. Alright guys, we're back. We're going to be going into a trench tour soon. Bill and I and Brandon.
And your dad.
My dad ain't going.
No.
How come? You don't want to fall. You don't want to get the August.
No, he's scared of the Germans.
Are you, Tracy?
No.
Oh, he's scared of the being wrong about the flag.
Oh,
No, it wasn't. He told you who was there. It was not U.S.
Oh yeah, then what flag is that now? You tell me now.
This
If you're here, if you're here.
The guy that they said was the last one up. Hungary. I think that's their flag.
Well, I get down there, I want to film, and you'll see. Maybe. Dad, come on, do your dance. Come on, go. I need to put a GIF where you're doing that to the whole thing going. I'm gonna do that. Let's put old music like this.
Tracy,
Hey, what?
get up and do it.
No.
All the people
For
can
the crowd.
see.
Oh, God.
People can clap. Oh yeah!
This is how Bob Ross dances.
What?
Bob Ross.
What about him?
This is how he dances.
How would you know?
You're Bob Ross.
I'm not Bob Ross.
You mean Bob Ross? You paint happy little.
Bob Ross.
You paint happy little trees.
No, I paint superheroes.
Happy little tree heroes.
Happy little tree heroes. Happy tree
Oh,
friends.
tree friends, yeah.
What the hell was that beat? I have no idea. The hell is that?
Oh, probably the planes.
It sounded weird. It sounded like it was right by us.
Yeah. It's over there somewhere, then.
I don't freaking know. That was weird.
Well, this was the area that they had closed off with the bees.
Was it?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Damon. You gonna freak out now?
Oh my God! Shut up!
What happened? What happened?
That's not funny. It's not funny.
I got done talking about the bees, remember, in World War II days? And the guy started up his airplane and went zzzz. And he went, oh God.
I got that on video. No, God, I'm taking that off of YouTube. I'm not. We're just gonna play you dancing instead.
Yeah, well, he's got you recorded.
Can you take that off of YouTube, please?
I'm not posting on YouTube, though.
Oh, you're not? I was gonna tell them to subscribe to you on you.
Maybe to his dance, I might.
Yeah, where's he going? Alright guys, I'm gonna film when we get ready to do this tour and stuff. It is cold as hell out here.
It's not cold.
It is cold.
Dude, feel it. It's snowing down. For the 1 o'clock, Stellar, everyone's here. We'll follow in behind the frame.
Well, we're gonna take a lot longer to get there.
Early tanks were not very good. Alright, so my name is Ryan. If you can't hear me, please just wave your hand or something. I'll try and shout louder. But we're going to start walking towards the trenches. Along the way, if you have any questions at all, please do ask. I'm more than happy to answer and talk about this at great length. As we're walking there, I'm going to give you some background information behind the cause and the start of World War I, so you have some understanding of what's going on once we get to the trenches. So in 1914, when World War I first started, everyone thought this was going to be a war of mobility. Much like the Russo-Japanese War had been about a decade prior, this was expected to be a war of armies moving and maneuvering. They didn't quite have tanks just yet, but those were coming up around. But people expected you would have armies moving to and fro, trying to outmaneuver and outfight the enemy. And the Germans, for example, had a plan called the Schlieffen Plan, which advocated for a rapid lightning strike assault on France. Because Germany during this conflict was landlocked, you had the French to their west, and the French allies, the Russians, to the east. And so if Germany was going to expand their territory, they couldn't fight this war on two fronts. They had to knock out the French really fast, and then move all of their forces east to contend with Russia, expecting that it would take Russia about 6 weeks to maneuver all of their forces from the Eastern Front, where they had been fighting with the Japanese previously, over to the Western. And others had this sort of idea as well. Throughout the 19th century leading up to World War I, everyone expected that there was going to be a massive conflict coming out. The politics of the age were centered around the balance of power, where you want to make sure that your enemy doesn't get too strong, because then they could use that power to strike at you, and everyone was afraid of this conflict. And so in order to strengthen yourself, you need to take it from someone else. And so the French and the Russians had several other plans, much like the Schlieffen, that advocated for striking the enemy first before they could mount a counteroffensive. So when the war starts, Germany is trying to execute its Schlieffen Plan. They're pushing with everything they've got against the western end. But the French and the British are able to hold them at one of the great large battles of the early parts of the war, the Battle of the Marne, in September, early September of 1914. At the Battle of the Marne, this was a battle of maneuvering armies. They weren't digging down into trenches, they weren't trying to hunker down and hold their spot, they were trying to displace the enemy. But the French and the British managed to outdo the Germans, and so the Germans begin to retreat east, and they cross a river, the River Ain. On the eastern side of that river, there's a nice little hillock, an elevated spot of land. So they get up on that hill, and they begin to dig down. Not because they want to stay here for the next 4 years fighting a war, but because they're waiting for reinforcements and resupply, so that way they can continue to try and execute the Schlieffen Plan. When the British and the French catch up to them at the River Ain, they find that the Germans are very well entrenched. Technology of this time had progressed to such an extent that it was very, very easy to defend where you're at, but it was very, very hard to displace an entrenched foe. You have rifled firearms that can fire at great accuracy at hundreds of yards of distance. You have machine guns that have been developing for a couple of generations now, getting to the point where they can semi-accurately discharge hundreds of rounds per minute, laying waste to any advancing force. You have artillery that could fire at great distance. In 1915, you'll start to see chemical weapons as well. All of this makes it very, very easy to keep the enemy from getting to you, but makes it very, very difficult to try and take space from the enemy. And so, by the time the Germans have entrenched themselves in, waiting for reinforcements, the British and the French catch up and find that they can't push them out. It's too easy to defend territory. And so they too decide, all right, well, we'll entrench, we'll dig in, and wait for reinforcements to the point where we can just overpower them. That time never happens. It quickly becomes apparent that the only way to displace the enemy is to try and extend your trench lines to encircle or encapsulate your foe. And this begins a period of a few months known as the Race to the Sea, where from September of 1914 to the end of that year, we will see trench works running all the way up to the North Sea and cutting down into the southeast all the way up into the Alps. And these will remain incredibly static during this conflict. We won't see a lot of change. Once we get into the trenches, you'll see even more examples of why that's the case. So, now that we have a bit of understanding about how accidental this was, it turns out to be a war fought from the trenches it was never intended to be, we'll start to talk about some of the features of the battlefield. Now, the space we are walking towards, and be careful because there are sort of uneven spots, was known as no man's land. This is the space between two opposing trench networks. And sometimes this could be very narrow. Once you get up into the Alps, you can only have about 16 yards of space between two trenches. There's just not this wide space of land. And so, if you're up in the Alps, you could smell what the enemy was cooking for dinner, and you could yell insults or whatever you wish at them, and they'll be able to hear. In general, though, it tended to be about 200 to 300 yards in distance. Enough that you could still take pot shots at the enemy, but you can't see them clearly or tell what they're saying. And this space would have been littered with the remains of previous assaults. Now right now, spring is, I guess, maybe deciding if it wants to come to northern Illinois. Some of the grass looks a little greenish, and that would have been very out of place in no man's land. Photographers and visitors to the battlefield remarked that it looked like a lunar landscape. There was nothing green growing here. That had long since died. Any artillery shells that land are going to explode, leaving these huge craters, which make it look like the face of the moon. Any living foliage or plant life is going to be killed by fire, by enemy fire, by chemical weapons, or in the case of the British, due to deliberate purpose, because they don't want to have anything obscuring the enemy. They want to have the enemy be fully exposed should they try and make a run across no man's land. So you wouldn't see trees and the like. You would, however, see the remains of any vehicles that had tried to pass through this area, be those tanks or aircraft. But this was far more grisly still. In the event of a failed assault, which most of them were, anyone who dies on the field is likely going to be trapped there. There were occasions where truces would be called for armies to come out and collect their wounded and dead, but these were the exception rather than the rule. And oftentimes it fell upon the defender to clean up the mess. At the Battle of Fromelles in 1916, there was a young German officer by the name of Adolf Hitler who was responsible for coming out and collecting the British and Australian dead, as they had led this failed offensive, and all of the carcasses were left because the British didn't think it was worthwhile to sign a truce to come out and collect the dead. And so the Germans were responsible for this. Under cover of night, they came out and collected the fallen while being exposed to fire, and then buried them in mass graves, threw some quicklime down, and called it a day. If you didn't have the fortune of coming to collect those dead, they would be trapped there. And there are grisly accounts of soldiers in the trenches who would write that their friends and comrades were just a few yards away from the trench, sometimes wounded, sometimes dead. But they wouldn't dare come out from the trench and try and collect their friend, because then they too would be exposed to enemy fire and likely killed. So this is a true hellish environment. Keep that in mind, how that's going to affect a soldier as we get into the trenches.
Here you go, David.
We do have duck boards set down into the trench, so wooden pallets if you will, to provide you something to walk on. Because you'll quickly become aware of how much standing water is going to be a problem in a trench. So do just mind your footing. Sharp wriggly chin and the like there as well. But if you're cautious and paying attention, we'll be just fine. Excellent observation. One of the things you'll notice is that a lot of times soldiers didn't have standard army issue equipment because trench warfare was very much novel to such a wide extent. It's obviously been used in the past. I'll get to your question in just a second, young fellow.
One moment.
Get to your question in just a second, but I'm glad you have it. Just hold it, all right? We'll get to it in a moment. But yeah, we do have cans that have stones put in it. And so, you've got your rations of bully beef or corned beef, what have you. Once you're done eating that, it's not garbage. You need to repurpose that for your livelihood. And so they're going to attach these to the barbed wire fencing, put some stones in it, so that way if an enemy tries to sneak up at night and cut your wire, the stones are going to clatter, you're going to know something's up. Excellent observation. We'll see more examples of that once we get in. You had a question, young fellow.
How come there are these holes along the, like a few meters away from the
That's
wall?
from artillery barrage.
Yeah. So if the enemy is firing artillery at your trenches, they probably don't have an exact idea of where your trench is, because if you look over there, there's another trench at that end. Can you see exactly where that trench is? Could you say that's 217 yards exactly? No, right? You have to kind of guess at it. And so they're going to be firing off shells and then making adjustments accordingly. And so you're going to find craters within no man's land where artillery is sort of calibrating its aim. Sometimes it misses, but then you'll correct your estimation, right? Good eye, good eye. Right, so feel free to follow me into the trenches here.
Oh Lord, here you go.
Again, we've got our duck board set down, so you have something stable to walk on. Because you'll immediately notice here to your right as you enter, we have a drainage channel. In places along the western front, such as Flanders, the water table is only a few feet deep. And so you can only dig down about 6 feet before you're hitting standing water. You're going to have to make adjustments for that. You can build up along the sides, but you're always going to have water funneling in, and that needs to be handled. Yeah?
No, I just saw a plank like you, and I'm questioning what that is. A plank.
What if you need to get across that? But something you don't see here in our reenactment here that you would have seen on the battlefield is that the trench is not built in one single line. You're going to do defense in depth. You're going to have 3, 4, sometimes 7 different lines of trench running backwards. Because if someone takes your front line, you need something to fall back to. And so they would have had channels that run perpendicular, so that way you could get to those rear lines. And I suppose you could call this an example of that. But yeah, good observation. But yeah, standing water is a constant problem. They do develop gas-powered pumps that can be used, but for the most part, those are a luxury. You're going to have to use good old manual labor to drain these out and throw it over. But the trench is going to act like a sump pump regardless. It's always going to draw this water in, and if it rains, all of that's going to flood in as well. It's a constant chore that soldiers have to deal with. Now the first quarters that we're going to see are German quarters. Feel free to talk to the soldiers here, go into the bunker and see what living conditions would have been like in a frontline trench.
Watch your head. Oh yeah, you watch your head. Seriously, watch your head. Not stand up. You two are. Watch your head, watch your head. I have to watch my head. How bad? The floor is slowly raising. Every year it's a little higher.
Hey, want to reenact the Star Wars episode where the stormtrooper hits his head on the thing?
Somebody looks like they want to ask a question.
Ask a question.
Trench warfare and chemical weapons. Someone's got something.
We make up great answers.
Yeah. Somebody's got something. You know everything about
everything?
World War I.
Everything?
If you don't have any questions, you know it all, right?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you, when you're like about to charge, how do you climb out of here without running into the barbed wire fence? Oh, there's like a way out there.
A break in the barbed wire.
Oh,
They have
okay.
breaks every so often in the barbed wire, and there'd be a ladder coinciding with that. They didn't most of the time just go over the top just willy-nilly.
Oh,
You didn't want to have, because they had all that barbed wire there, but there would be breaks in the barbed wire every so often.
Sometimes
and
they'd be very intricate maze too, but
Yeah.
after time you would know the maze to get out. Your enemy wouldn't, but you would.
Oh, okay.
So it wouldn't be like a straight shot to get through. You'd have to come in zig and zag a little bit.
They probably defend that really well, so that way it's hard for if they do.
There would
spot for a machine gun.
Yeah.
Very good spot for a machine gun.
And so this is maintained throughout the year. During Christmas we do a World War I in the trenches for Christmas event. So we do some upkeep on the tent, and obviously for World War I Day we do a lot of folks in here. But this is all cool to see.
Oh my God. Stuck in here.
Yeah, watch your head. There's all kinds of things hanging.
Yep.
All kinds of things very low.
So did the soldiers take like shifts? You know, like somebody would sleep while someone was on watch?
Probably, yeah. That's wax. The candle burned down.
Oh, nice.
That's from the last battle.
I see a rat.
Yeah, that's Herman. Pat Herman. And if he isn't a good rat, we're going to keep him.
Quite a toll to be up on the front line for very long.
And you.
I can't imagine that being tasty, a rat.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely.
Tastes like chicken.
I guess if you're really hungry.
Yes, if you're really hungry, yeah.
Alright, I'll let you get in, Bill.
There's actually some really good videos on YouTube
Go on ahead.
of military hospitals dealing with post-traumatic stress.
Well, there's also an attempt to
Over
understand where the enemy artillery positions are at as well. So, aviation, as I sort of highlighted but haven't talked about yet, is very, very vital for this. Because if you're looking across no man's land, you don't really know exactly where their trenches are, how deep they are, where they've stationed men, that sort of thing. And so if you can control the air, you can fly planes over. The engines aren't strong enough yet to carry large stocks of munitions, so you can't drop bombs or anything of that sort, but you can take photographs.
Oh damn, you didn't get one from me?
And so, you can look online and they have tons of aerial photographs that are
There's
available
bullets in
for
there,
free.
I didn't even know.
And so, once you have that knowledge, you can tell, alright, they are this many yards away from us, we need to calibrate to this angle, and then you can start to target, but you can also see where the enemy has stationed their artillery at as well. And so you'll be trying to disrupt them vis-a-vis the same way on the other end. But one of the features of a trench is that it zigs and zags. And part of that is for artillery. If an artillery shell lands in your trench, it's going to explode in a radius of shrapnel. But as it zigs and zags, that cuts off the extent of the damage it can do. It can only travel as far as that bend. And so, even if they land a shell in, it's going to cause some devastation, yeah, but it's not the end of the trench by any means. It means that the soldiers are going to have to spend about a day or so repairing and restructuring the trench itself. But it's still going to hold up all right.
The only difference with the Bavarian, you have a national and state cockade down here. The Bavarians had a blue and white instead of the red, white, and black. They had a blue and white cockade here instead. The bands are like your branch of service.
And so one of the things, for those of you who are off at the front, I hope you can hear me. Are we? Yeah, so right, standing water is a problem, right? And it's not raining today, but all of that water is naturally going to channel in here. Tomorrow, when it does rain, this is going to become a nightmare to travel through. So you picked the right day to come.
Yeah, there's like mud over there and everything.
Yeah.
Ice in this.
It's unpleasant, to say the least. But there was a shell that was hanging from the doorway in there, and it had a rod inside. And this is another example. You'd mentioned the cans that have been sort of repurposed as an alarm. You have that shell, which tells us what?
Gas attack.
Precisely. This is not standard army issue. No one in Germany is going, oh, let's take this empty shell and put a rod in here. No, this is soldiers who are adapting to these new conditions. And so this is a great example of how this is a very unconventional war. No one had expected this was going to be fought from trenches, and so it's not command, it's not brass that's issuing this down, it's a soldier going, all right, there are gas attacks that I have to contend with now. How am I going to tell my fellow comrades that they need to anticipate this? Because a lot of these gases are colorless and odorless. You don't know that you're suffering from it until your lungs start burning or your skin starts burning from mustard gas. And so, they've repurposed, essentially garbage, and turned it into something functional and practical. You find this all the time in the trenches, all right? So, for those who didn't hear the first time I was saying it, the trench itself zigs and zags. You can continue coming down. We also have here some quarters that would have been in one of those rear line trenches. You can go inside and investigate. They're a lot nicer than what we just saw here. But still, this is not airtight and waterproof. When the wind blows, you're going to get trapped. And when it rains, you're going to get rained on still. So this is one of the 5-star living quarters of being in a trench. It still doesn't quite live up.
Huh.
But as I was
You can actually stand up in there.
Zigs and zags.
Well, that feels
This is
weird.
very intentional for 2 reasons.
I feel like I'm on a
The first
boat.
is that if an artillery shell happens to land in your trench, it's going to explode
Oh,
in a
there's
radius
Bill.
of shrapnel.
Excuse me.
But if the line itself zags, that's going to mitigate the amount of damage that can be caused. The second reason is that if the enemy manages to lead an assault, if they fix bayonets to go over the top, if they make it through all the hazards of no man's land, the unexploded oranges, the landmines, the barbed wire, the scraping fire that's coming from your lines, if they make it through all of those dangers, they find themselves in this quarter of trench. And you are going to be on that side, and your allies are going to be on that side, and you are going to catch the enemy in what is known as enfilade fire, being hit from two different angles where they're completely exposed and you have absolute cover. So even after all of those sacrifices just to get here, they now still have another uphill battle to try and hold this space, not even to mention extending it. Very, very easy to defend a trench, very, very difficult to take it from the enemy. And we can continue moving along, so that way folks at the back have a chance to have a look in here. Our next segment is going to be an American French.
Oh, it is an American flag. See, I knew I was right. Oh, what do you say about that, Dad?
So feel free to look for any differences and talk to the soldiers here as well to get their perspective on this one.
Sorry.
So this is a very global war. You would have had not only your British and your French soldiers within the same French line, but these are also colonial states. You have British and French territories in the globe. And so, one of the battles we'll talk about is
How are things at Old Play?
Tell the difference between see the Western one. They got the helmet, they have a very modern field gear.
You know if we have the trench for the next battle?
I have no idea. I'm interested here.
Yeah, I was just waiting for a room.
Firewood.
Yeah. Firewood.
Oh, Cheez-Its. I love my Cheez-Its too.
Me too.
It's just after lunchtime.
I have Cheez-Its at home. I'm gonna get myself some. Oh, sorry, you're trying to take a picture of that.
Yep.
It's just a basic equipment for the Americans in World War I.
That's cool.
Both the Marines and the Army had basically the same stuff.
Isn't that a World War II weapon too? Wasn't that used in World War II?
They came out, they had them in probably 1917, but they never shipped them overseas till late 1918. They had them in World War I for the last 2 months.
So I think I saw those in World War II once too.
Oh yeah, they used them up into Vietnam.
Ah,
The BAR.
kind of like the M1 Grand they used in Vietnam a little bit.
Yeah,
More.
The Arvin and stuff had those. By that time we had M14s and M16s.
Yeah. You can go in, Bill. Yeah, move aside. Try to get out of here. Excuse me. There we go. Hey, Brandon.
So yeah, it was oftentimes chaos, and it took them until 1916, 17 to really tactically become effective again. That and gas warfare, so you see a lot of us carrying these. It's the Zielinski Kumat gas mask. It's based on the on a pre-war miner's mask. Surprisingly, it's a very modern design. The problem is A, the production consistency was not always good, and B, the fact that they didn't make enough. So soldiers were often running around with like gauze masks and goggles, because that was the only thing they could on short notice have.
It's so good.
You see that with bad masks all the way through the end of the war.
We did. That's impressive. Yeah.
Come on in, file through, you can look at all this stuff, look at the bunker. We're making some lunch right now.
Trying to.
That's interesting. Sorry.
Oh, excuse me.
Hi guys.
That's cool. Is that
Questions?
the blanks?
Excuse me?
Is that the blanks?
Indeed. So as you can see, there's no ball round at the end.
That's cool.
It's just capped off at the end with some black powder inside.
That's cool.
Guys, have any questions or anything you see, please ask.
Have you seen any of these propaganda posters, any of the gear, uniforms?
Yeah, I'm guessing that is Russian.
It is. It is.
Because I can tell by the writing on it.
Yeah, the Cyrillic alphabet's very distinct.
Based on the Greek alphabet.
I like the image on it though. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the people of Russia before World War I, it was around only about 20% of the population was literate. So as a result, in order to have effective propaganda, they very much so relied on imagery over text or something like that. So they use symbols that everybody would know. So for example, on the top, we have a double-headed eagle. We might say, well, what's up with that? That's typically seen as a symbol of Tsarist Russia. A coat of arms, exactly. And what it's doing is it's throttling the Prussian eagle. So, you know, it's just saying Russia will defeat Germany in World War I. And this is an advertisement for a bond.
Which I also have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So, because I know in World War II it was Soviet Russia. I didn't know if was it Soviet Russia in World War I or did it happen after World War I?
It happened because of World War I. So it's a direct, as direct a relationship as you could establish in terms of history.
Yeah, because I didn't know about that and I was wondering that because I was asking my dad that and he didn't know either. So I was curious.
Because of, well, I'll give you the 5-second version. Russia does poorly in World War I. Mostly because of a lack of leadership capability. Being an imperial royal system, you were promoted to be a general and officer not because of your ability, but more so because of your relationship to the family. So, for example, one of the field marshals in the Russian army were the brothers and uncles of the Tsar. So they were made that because they had the right name, Romanov. So as a result, the war itself goes very poorly for Russia, and as he's saying here, industrial production was always a problem. You guys have probably seen Enemy at the Gates, right?
Yeah.
Movie about World War II. What's that opening scene of that it's a pretty horrible film in my opinion. I love Jude Law, but it's a pretty terrible film. What's the beginning scene? They're telling men, yeah, here's a rifle, here's a packet of ammunition, rifle packet. And then when one man dies, you pick up the rifle. Well, for World War II, that's bunk. That World War II, they had more than enough rifles. Kind of a, German myth that all these poor Soviets didn't even have blah, blah, blah. But in World War I, unfortunately, that is very much the case. You have men who are using old rifles from the 1870s, different calibers. Oh, that's just a spent one. Here, that's yours.
Let's look at the facts.
Enjoy. And like you said over here, they can't make enough Mosin rifles. This would have been the standard rifle of the Tsarist forces. Well, they can't make enough of them. They weren't ready for war. Russia was, I don't want to say they were a pre-industrial country, but they're ramping up to become an industrial country. Financed by France, of course. France basically paid, what's that? Oh, another one.
Questions about the gear or any of the propaganda?
Oh, this one is a live one. I will take this. Thank you.
I was just saying, I haven't, the prior lived in.
So they can never make enough of these. They mobilized an army of 8 million men, so they need 8 million rifles. Never enough. So as we know, there are accounts of units going into battle with perhaps 1/3 of the men not having rifles. So it's quite a high ratio. So as you see, they try to do it in Russia, but also you guys, if you're collecting in firearms at all, you're aware of that there's Remington-made Mosin guns. There's Westinghouse-made Mosin guns.
Someone finished makes the hexagonal receiver.
This is actually, all Mosins were hexagonal receiver until they simplified them in the 1930s.
Okay.
So that's why if you look at any one of these,
behind your shoulders, hold the mask over your
most
head.
of them are hexagonal, all of them are.
And then this.
That was just a standard. Now they realized in the 30s, well, that's stupid. We can just make it circular and
I guess it was the Finnish that were still doing that then.
Yeah, the Finnish, they used this rifle too because, again, they were such a poor country. They didn't have the money to buy Mausers or buy a new rifle after World War I. So they just kept upgrading the Mosins, but they kept using the same system. Anyway, they lose the war because, again, of industrial capacity. So you see guys with Remington-made, American-made guns. You see them with Italian rifles, Japanese rifles. The government bought Type 38 Arisakas from the Emperor's government to arm its troops. Well, now if they were being smart about it, they would say, okay, this regiment will have Mosins. That's one ammunition type. This regiment will have Italian rifles, and that regiment will have Japanese rifles. Well,
half of those were
the shortages were so severe that they said, okay, we're giving guns to everybody. Everybody gets a gun. Problem is, now you have a Mosin, you have an Italian rifle, you have a Japanese rifle. In one unit, we have 3 different types of ammunition. So logistically, the system is flawed, to say the least. So for that and for many other reasons, now not to say that Russia does poorly the entire war. We did a battle this morning to try to simulate the Brusilov Offensive. This was an offensive in 1916 planned by the Russian government to knock Austria-Hungary out of the war. Austria-Hungary is the junior partner in the Central Powers. So they almost worked, yeah. So they figured, well, if we can knock them out, that's one less enemy, and we can kind of get our momentum back. And it did very, very well. The Austrians were tottering, to say the least, in 1916. So this offensive almost very nearly knocked them out of the war. Only saved by the timely intervention of, I believe, 4 to 6 German divisions. So you're talking 60 to 80,000 men pulled off the Western Front and sent in to save the Austria-Hungary's bacon, so to speak.
I'm pretty sure it caused also Romania to join in trying to take back their...
Yes, exactly. So Romania
they thought, oh, Austria-Hungary's going to fall, we can do this.
Yeah, so Romania sees, oh wow, the Russians are doing really, really well. Well, they don't calculate then that, you know, they would very quickly put together a force and occupy Romania.
We have another group coming up behind us.
Sorry, guys.
No, we're good. We're spending a lot of time here. That's great.
You paid for it, so that's what you paid for, right? Guys, we'll be in the village later on. Do come find us. We can continue this story.
All right.
Guys, have a great weekend.
You have a good day. Whew, a lot of smoke.
Still smells good.
Oh, wow.
So the last segment of friends we have here is our Russian friends. It's a good example of sort of a trench in progress. Obviously, these things don't just pop up in the middle of the night. It takes time and labor to construct them to be up to snuff. And so this is an example of where you might not have enough manpower or enough time. You just need something for these men to take shelter in. And this will suffice for the moment. Now, during the race to the sea, that period I talked about after the Battle of the Marne, where everyone was trying to outpace their enemy, there was a great rush to try and construct as much trench as possible. And there are 3 different ways to extend your trench network. The first and the fastest is to simply line men up along the surface. We're just going to continue walking around behind, and then we'll lap back to where we came from. Is to line men up on the surface, and then have them start digging down. Now this is something you're only going to do at night, because you're completely exposed while you're standing up there. But according to the British Army manual, it would take 450 men, 6 hours of work at night, to produce 275 yards of trench. But again, that is the most dangerous method, completely exposed when you attempt that. Your other option, your safest option, is called sapping, where you're going to have 1 to 2 men, as many as you can fit abreast, who are standing at the end of your trench, and they're going to dig in from the side. They're completely sheltered, so you don't have to worry about them dying, but you can only work so many men at a time, and it's a bit slower working in that environment. So you've always got someone who's sapping at it from the end, but it's not going to go very quickly. Your third method is one of subterfuge, which I love, because again, during that race to the sea, you're extending your trench line, but you're hoping that maybe you can pull a bluff, that you can make your enemy think that your trenches stop here, so they'll waste time and energy trying to cut across no man's land. So if you're tunneling, you are leaving a shelter of earth above. So anyone looking across no man's land, they're not going to see your tunneling. Even aerial photographs aren't going to recognize that level of disturbance in the soil. And so, you tunnel outwards, leaving that shelter of earth. The enemy takes a photo, they think they've got you beat, they start to cut across no man's land, and that's when you unleash your shelter of earth. You have now however many yards of trench, you've thrown the enemy off, you've wasted their time and frustrated them, and now you're going to try and cut across and encircle them. So there's a lot of sort of cat and mouse going on with this while you're trying to extend to those trench lines. Again, as I mentioned when we first came in, trenches did not go in one line. You would have done defense in depth. So you're going to have 2, 3, sometimes 7 or 8 lines running behind that are sheltered and more secure, where you can stockpile supplies, munitions, and men, because you don't want to leave them exposed in that front line, where they're more likely to get hit with a gas or shell attack. But this would have been even more trench lines. And if you're interested, I advise you to go online. You can find a lot of these photographs for free. They've been archived and documented, and you can see how these would have looked from the air. Again, very, very easy to hold your territory, almost impossible to take it from the enemy. And one of the last things I want to talk about, or sort of elaborate on some of the conditions in the trenches. As you saw, they're far from ideal, oftentimes just terrible. And one of the conditions that really comes about in this conflict is commonly known as trench foot. We understand nowadays that if you go and you do some exercise and your feet get sweaty, you should probably wash your feet and change your socks, otherwise you'll get a fungal infection. And soldiers understood that then too. There were, as I hope I mentioned and you were able to hear, soldiers fighting from across the globe, here even on the Western Front, let alone other theaters. So, in Flanders, with the British and the French, you also had Indian soldiers. The French brought soldiers from their colonial holdings in Morocco and many places in Africa. And a lot of these are tropical environments, where people are accustomed to having humid conditions where you need to change your socks. But standard army issues didn't accommodate for this. And if you're only issued that one pair of socks, you're stuck with that one pair of socks. If you're in a frontline trench where they don't have laundering facilities, you're stuck with those dirty socks. And so trench foot and other fungal infections become very, very commonplace, and if left untreated will require amputation. It takes the British Army, for example, 2 years before their medical manuals begin to say that trench foot is caused by having wet, dirty feet. You need to wash your feet and change your socks to prevent this infection. It takes them 2 years to get that published. Not because they're stupid. Like I said, they understood this. But the medical and logistical communities of these armies are so strapped by this conflict that it takes them that long just to catch up to speed. But there are also things that they weren't accustomed to previously on such a large scale. Things such as the German soldiers mentioned shell shock. What we nowadays understand to be post-traumatic stress disorder is caused from living in these conditions where every minute of every day is spent with hazards. Environmental hazards, illness and disease, vermins and pests. All of this is going to wear away and stress you out. And when you're left in these conditions, post-traumatic stress disorder is a common occurrence. And certainly there were soldiers in the past who had developed this. Wars have been going on for millennia now, and certainly there have been soldiers who developed this condition, but never to such a wide extent that it became aware, or it was aware of, by military command. And so it's a sad state of fact that the first soldiers to develop shell shock would oftentimes have these sort of 1,000-yard stares, where they would have these almost manic expressions on their face. Many developed tics, physical tics or spasms. They would have weird gaits as they walk. And again, you can find footage of these treatments online again. And you'd be hard-pressed, if you didn't know better, to tell the difference between a medical film and a Monty Python skit, because they look so very comical. And for the folks back home, and for military brass, they see this and they don't understand why it's happening. And so their immediate response is, you're pretending to be sick, you look silly, you're just trying to get out of serving on the front, this is dereliction of duty or cowardice, and they'll oftentimes be put to death for the crime of high treason. Before we understood it. Yeah. This is the first time on a grand scale that it's been manifested. Or that it has manifested, I should say. Certainly there was some Roman soldier who developed PTSD. Absolutely 100% sure that happened. But no one documented it because it was so isolated. But here in these conditions, this is so stressful that it happens to a wide extent. And so yeah, these soldiers would have been put to death for the crime of high treason. After the war, there are still 80,000 soldiers in Britain alone who are being treated for shell shock. And they come to understand the causes of this are stress and things of that sort. And they begin to develop treatments. One of the first treatments that is written about but not accepted by the military is to get them out of that condition and engage in therapy. Have them talk about their problems and their issues, and that this could help. Brass didn't believe that. They again still thought that this was some make-believe issue. But again, the military command is so strapped by everything that's going on that they just don't have the resources to deal with this. And so it becomes another iconic face of this conflict. We can keep moving if everyone's all right. I didn't mean to hold this up there. But other conditions weren't as life-threatening, but still obnoxious. You had lots of vermin, lice, and fleas were incredibly commonplace when you're wearing wool outfits and you don't have the means to clean them properly. It's going to become a habit for infestation. And so, at the onset of this war, you have soldiers who have beards or mustaches, who might have long hair. That has to be put to an end. Either because it's going to become a habitat for lice, or because you're not going to be able to affix your gas mask. That beard is going to keep it from affixing properly. Rats are also another commonplace problem. There are some grisly accounts of rats that would be feasting upon the corpses just outside of no man's land. And so a lot of the soldiers developed a very vehement hatred of rats for this reason. One of the common recreational activities of World War I was rat catching. The rat terrier, if you're familiar with the show Frasier, the dog from that show is a rat terrier, becomes very widespread in trenches because you can use them to catch rats, thus the name. And again, you can find photographs of companies and the like who are standing alongside these great, I suppose you could call them racks of rats that their particular terrier has caught. And they would make sort of games out of this. Whose rat terrier was the most effective? And not only did it get rid of this nuisance on the battlefield, but it was some catharsis for the soldiers in this conflict, where you're enduring these conditions day in and day out and have very little to show for it. Because again, holding a trench is extremely easy, taking the enemy's trench is incredibly difficult. Just being able to say, my suffering today was okay because that rat got it, helps. It really does. And so I hope this has given you a better picture of what this conflict was like and how it impacted future generations who had to go through this horrendous experience. If you have any questions at all about trench warfare, I would be more than happy to stick around and talk at great length about it. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed yourself and enjoy the rest of your time here at World War I Days.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Have a good day.
You as well.
Who'd you think, Bill?
Good.
Alright guys, I'm gonna stop this now. And then we're gonna get ready to show the battle here soon. See you guys soon.
Look at that one. Look at that one. It's really.
Oh, he's good.
These airplanes fly about 6 to 8 minutes on a battery charge.
Holy.
I thought it would have been used to be like.
Oh God.
The whole medic back then. Yep. Well, that's why you see that little.
And you see it.
The stakes with the.
Yeah.
That's medical.
So guys, this is what the main battlefield's gonna look like. I have no idea how I'm gonna set a tripod. Cause if people sit up here,
You can set it even right here if you wanted.
then I won't be able to look at it to see what I'm looking at.
No, you can.
I guess I'll try.
You don't have to go all the way down. You can just do.
Well, it depends. If there's a lot of people sit really high, then I'm gonna make it really high up. It's just, there's the problem that I see with it, is that
You'd have to hold it back.
See, this is what I mean. I don't know about this actually, because that's gonna.
Here, let me see something. I got an idea.
Because the thing I have a problem with it is that if someone's sitting right there, I can't like check. Then I gotta look down on the camera all the time and not watch it.
Well, I don't know if anybody was sitting in front of us or not. You try. Well, that don't work either. Shit.
See what I'm saying?
I was hoping to get it to where I could stand it, but it doesn't look like it's going to fit that way either.
Guys,
of course, that fell.
Guys, we're gonna have to figure it out. I'll be back. Turns out I might not be able to use that.
Yeah, not right here anyway.
I'll probably only be able to use it in the town battle.
That's fine.
Over where? By them. You see closer?
I'm surprised they don't have a fence line going up though. Fire.
The Russian.
Yep. Ooh. Damn, that breeze is getting cold out here though. Whew.
Hi. Hi. Say hi to the camera, Bill.
Hi.
Oh. Forgot, in World War I, was it Soviet Russia still, or was it just, or did Soviet Russia start in World War II?
Well, I know. I don't think it was Soviet Russia yet. I'd have to look that up.
I'm not sure either. Anyways, guys, we're going to stop for now. I just wanted to record that because that was really interesting. See you guys soon. Turns out we can't use the tripod, though, by the way, guys, because apparently the tripod just doesn't work in this situation.
You'd have to be down on the ground.
Yeah. I don't want to be in a wet ground. That'll sound fun.
Them guys are.
Fall! I like how they're pretend. I can hear the pretend shooting. I hear them go blah blah.
Yep. He's ruling over there. Fire, fire.
I don't think they're gonna actually fire.
No, they're saving the ammo for the real battle.
Yeah, they have. It's expensive.
Real ammo is expensive.
Oh yeah.
That's why in the war they say conserve your ammo.
Well, that's why
It's not really ammo though. It's just blanks.
It still costs money. It's like what in World War II, the Russians were using potatoes for grenades.
Potatoes, or dummy grenades.
Yeah. They're spuds.
The spud grenades. Play hot potato.
Yeah. Yeah,
the way they did that. Oh, Did you hear that guy down there?
Yeah.
He's like, where's the Oscar for that at?
Yeah.
Great.
Oh shit. Oh, they're getting ready, boys.
That's a crazy looking gun.
It's gonna be one of those.
Yep. Hey, wait a minute now. They're not supposed to be carrying propane tanks out here.
Why?
Because they didn't have propane tanks back then.
Maybe it's for the freaking thing over the little house
It's
over there.
a joke. They gotta go with modern conveniences.
Oh shit!
Propane tanks.
He said the hell with the carton and he's lugging.
Well, then
it
Hank
on
Hill
the
would be.
shoulder.
Hank Hill would not be happy back then. No propane.
He's like Arnold right there.
There's no propane.
You have nothing with the gully, man. You can't carry that gun. Sling it over his shoulder.
Did that continue?
No, it's good.
Yeah, you got on video. Come on.
No,
you started.
If you want to do this on video, I'll take it more serious, I guess. Now see that. Is that French? Or is that
That's German.
German. Yep.
French.
German.
You can't even tell, can you?
It's hard without insignias and stuff.
I can see.
Yeah, they have the rope right there, boy. In that box.
What?
The rope's in the box right there.
Oh, yeah, looks like they haven't put them up yet. Yep, it's starting.
One quick safety note before I turn things over to Jeff. He's going to run you through a bunch of what you'll see in front of you. Is we don't allow anybody out in the field just for safety reasons because sometimes we have a lot of blanks that are not fired. If you're in the village battles and you pick up blanks, or if you're here and the reenactors bring you stuff, it should be shot off. But if you see something that looks like a blank that's not fired, like the end of it's not opened up, and it sounds like a salt and pepper shaker, turn it into a reenactor because it can be extremely dangerous. If they're spent rounds, you can take them home as souvenirs. And the reenactors will come up after the battle. They'll try to piece up as much grass and they'll pass stuff out along the crowd line here. Also, if you're interested in seeing the trenches, the volunteers for 7 years now have worked on trying to build very authentic looking trenches. The only problem is that they are very authentic, so they have some original barbed wire around them. They also have sharp edges, rusty nails, and slippery duck boarding, just like the real trenches. But if you want to take a tour, there's a white tent next to the port pots over here, and about 11:45, about every 15 minutes throughout the day, except for when we have battles out here, they're going to be able to run crowds through. I think admission's a couple bucks, and they'll actually give you the history of what's in the bunkers. You'll be able to see the furniture and the setup and the reenactors actually living in the bunkers. We have about 250 to 300 reenactors on site this weekend.
Oh, wow.
And most of them are actually sleeping here on site, and we have several guys that are actually sleeping out the bunkers. You'll be able to see the trench stoves and stuff going and how they try to stay warm. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jeff. Thank you very much.
Привет. Guten Tag. Bonjour. Buongiorno. Good day, mate. And all that. Because we're talking about the First World War. And the First World War was a war which involved the world. And we have many countries fighting in this war. But what we're going to do today, this morning, what you're here to see, is what's called the Forgotten War. When Winston Churchill wrote his big history on the First World War, he wrote 6 volumes. And those 6 volumes covered the Western Front. It covered Gallipoli. It covered the Middle East. And it wasn't until 5 years later that Churchill decided he needed to add a seventh volume, which he named The Forgotten War. And that's because most people, when they think of World War I, they think of the Western Front, Gallipoli. Sometimes they might think about Macedonia. But generally they do not think of Russia, they don't think of the Caucasus, and yet that was where some of the largest battles took place. And it was the greatest extent. So what I'm going to start just briefly today is introducing some of the countries which fought on the Eastern Front.
Here you go.
We don't know it. The Ottoman Empire sent troops to help the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Galicia. We've got an Ottoman soldier here. The Ottoman Army had been trained by the German Army. The Ottoman Navy was trained by the British, so interesting dynamic there. But he's wearing a basic simple uniform, straight wool. He's wearing a peasant's hat, which is designed, it was something which the Anatolian people wore as a common headdress, but mainly German equipment. The Ottoman Army actually was very well trained. The problem, like most of the armies in World War I, is that trained force existed at the beginning of the war, and because of the tremendous amount of casualties, the replacements received less and less training. But, so you have the Ottoman Army fighting on the Eastern Front. Of course, we have our German Army, one of the two major Central Powers who fought on the Eastern Front. Actually, when the war starts, the German plan was that they would just hold Russia off while they focus on France, the famous Schlieffen plan. That didn't work. In fact, throughout World War I, generally the Russian army was asked to help the Allies anytime the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians made a major attack against them. And we're going to talk about that and what we're going to see today. So we have our Germans. We have our heroes, our great people, the Russians. I will tell you this, I've worn probably 50 different uniforms in either my military career or reenactment.
All right.
This is the most comfortable and practical uniform I've ever worn. I love it. The Russian Army today still uses a lot of these items. But this is our basic frontnik, frontline soldier. By 1916, a lot of the leather equipment is being replaced by what the Germans would call ersatz replacements, canvas ammo pouches, canvas bags on for their canteens, things like that. But still, the Russian Army, huge, took a lot of casualties. The Allies would not have won the war without what the Russian Army did, even though Russia ends up basically surrendering to Germany and giving up in a treaty at Brest-Litovsk in January 1918. And they step out of the war then. But the Russian contribution to World War I is really incalculable. And we have the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This empire, most people think, shouldn't exist. It was multicultural. Officers in 1914 had to know to speak 3 languages. The command language is German. Generally, they had to know Hungarian. And then, depending on where their troops came from, that dialect or separate language. So just imagine when this army goes to war, and by January 1915, because of the losses, they lose that skill in their officer and their senior NCO corps. And again, that's one of the challenges the Austro-Hungarian Army has, is replacing these people who could actually communicate in the multi-languages used in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Okay? So thank you. Go ahead and step back. I encourage you, after this battle, go through the camps. All these armies have displays in various locations here in Midway Village. Please stop by, visit them, have them talk to you about their equipment, their uniforms, how it's equipped. Now, what are we going to do today?
It's got to be 11.
This is World War I. What's the big challenge in World War I? Anybody? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, machine guns. Kind of getting from one end to the other. What has changed? In the American Civil War, a Confederate or Union soldier could stand 300 meters away from the enemy and wave. But what changes is the modern weaponry. Not only do you get increased range and increased accuracy using smokeless powder, which was introduced in the 1880s, 1890s, you also have improvements in rapid loading, and you have improvements in sighting. So what it means is, where in the Civil War, I was pretty safe at 300 meters, In World War I, if I can see you, I can kill you. 7,000, 10,000 meters, doesn't matter. If I can see you, I can either get artillery on you, I can get machine guns on you, and if you're close enough, I'll get rifle fire on you. So that's the dynamic which changes. And we're not talking about a rifle or a machine gun or artillery piece which shoots 1 or 2 bullets a minute. We're talking about weapons which are capable of firing in the rifles anywhere from 15 to 20 rounds a minute, machine guns up to 600 rounds a minute, artillery was firing 7 to 10 rounds a minute. So the sheer volume makes the problem of crossing this open area dangerous. Because, just think, the enemy's in a trench. You see this much of them, just space. And that's what you're trying to hit. But you're attacking, you get up, you've got your full body exposed. And then you have obstacles. We put some obstacles out there. Why? Obstacles are not designed to kill you. Obstacles are just there to slow you down so I got more time to shoot at you. It's delay, and that's the challenge of World War I. How does the soldier get out of his trench, go across the open area, and attack the enemy in their trench? And this stalemate really isn't truly broken until you have the introduction of infiltration tactics, tanks, and airplanes. And by 1918, you start seeing these devices starting to break down this problem of World War I. But before we get to tanks and effective airplanes and the infiltration tactics, which were really introduced in 1917, we're going to show you what the Russians used in 1916. In 1916, remember I told you without the Russians, the Allies probably would have lost? In 1916, what's happening in April 1916? Does anybody know? Verdun. The Germans launched a massive attack against the French forces around Verdun. And the German plan is, we don't have to win, we just have to kill far more of them than they kill of us. It's the really first time you see an attrition battle which is planned from the beginning. And that's the nature of the warfare in World War I. It is machine mass warfare. So the Germans launched this offense in April. And the Germans have some quick successes, doing very well. The French casualties are rising alarmingly. The British then launched their Somme offense. And the Somme offense, the first day of the Somme, is the bloodiest day in the
I'll
British
film
Army.
when we get ready to fight.
60,000 casualties in about 15.
He had all this, and then he had that middle.
Shaved it right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to probably stand in the front because people are gonna keep walking past. It's gonna get annoying.
From up here, we can see it really well.
Yeah, but I'm talking about when you get like low down and start shooting. I want to be close to it. That's it.
Oh my God.
And now they'll be setting up for the final assault. And you're starting to see some Germans abandoning their trench.
That was cool.
So by providing supporting fire while the other wing goes into the trenches and they're clearing the trenches, pushing the enemy back. All right, thank you very much. Give the reenactors a round of applause there. Obviously, we'll have to do some retraining on this one unit. Do I have any questions or anything of what you saw or anything else? You see the medics working. The First World War saw a huge change in the way.
The British decided on the Somme Valley they're going to make a major offensive. Kitchener had rebuilt his army, and it was almost completely wiped out in 1914. The lines stabilized before the British were overrun. The French were able to stabilize their lines after losing 1 million casualties after that Alsace and Lorraine, getting themselves headlong into machine gun and artillery fire in pre-planned areas that the Germans were determined was a killing zone, and they killed a lot of French. So the French army and the British army were recovering by 1960. They had rebuilt their ranks. They had increased the size of their army. They got their production facilities and their factories up to where they could produce enough artillery, machine guns, planes that they needed to kind of break the stalemate in 1916. We'll also see the introduction of a new technology in 1916, the first introduction of tanks. That were first being used.
God, I can't see a thing because it's the sun. I know.
They need something that
so I can't see where I'm zooming in or anything.
To go across the field, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But our two main players here: the British Army soldier.
It's like I can't see a damn thing.
Standard issue military gear. He has his cartridge pouches in the front and on the sides, and he's got his bayonet. This is an entrenching tool handle. He would carry the pickaxe piece on the back, turn around. He also has his day pack here that we carry his toiletries, extra socks, maybe a sweater, emergency rations, and things like that. He also has a large.
Very little.
This can either be worn on the side.
You can see it, but not very well.
Salt pattern.
That's all I'm saying.
And he also has a water bottle on the other side. Turn over. So he's got a felt-covered water bottle. What's interesting about this water bottle, you can see a little blue peeking out. It's enameled steel with blue enameling on it, and it's pretty much the same pattern canteen the British have been using for since the Revolutionary War. Their mess tin also had changed very little since the Revolutionary War. You'll see his helmet too. Prior to 1916, most armies had soft caps. That's what they wanted to wear. But we had a helmet. Believe it or not, it was the French that were the really innovative ones. They developed.
Here they go.
So you'll see the machine gun fires on the far flanks. They're laid on covering fire and lanes of fire. So they can put down some covering fire on the other trench. These guys are up above. The guys that are sitting on the other side, they're trying to get their weapons loaded, safety off, in position to start firing. The machine guns are trying to keep their heads below the line. So these guys put a fancy like they're not getting the top. What would usually happen is once the guys are in an exposed position, that they would immediately start to pull out cruise poisons in the line to their artillery. That was miles and miles of the lines of camouflage positions. And they would start to work with their artillery so they artillery rounds on the field. And just have to see inside the artillery in a couple minutes on both sides. The Germans would also send counter battery fire on the other side to try to keep the nice soft up right on top of each other. But this is pretty much how they fought the battles from 1914, 1950 to 1960. The gains in territory in that year and a half period was about a half at the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives. You can see the Germans bogged down, they're trying to use whatever available cover they have. But there's a lot of guys that are either getting hit, or wounded, or they're pinned down because they can't advance any further because they don't have enough guys. If you go and try to advance with onesies and twosies towards a organized line of resistance, you're going to get cut down by rifle fire and machine gun fire. While these guys are falling down, sometimes it's probably going to counter battery fire and come down and hit the Germans to prevent the second wave from coming out. But then these guys can get back to the track. They realize that they bogged down, so they're trying to call the retreat now. They're trying to get back to the line, but it's still standing. That's counter battery fire from the Germans trying to hit their lines. They were trying to conserve artillery at certain points unless there was a major offensive or they had stockpiled ammunition, because the ammunition is extremely difficult to keep in the positions. So now there's an artillery duel between the two sides. They're trying to hit the bunkers or the machine gun positions, which is kind of hit or miss, especially when the positions are very well camouflaged. 1916, you'll see a mix of guys in regiments where some of them have pickle helmets, spiked helmets, and you start to see guys with shot helmets, which are the steel helmets that the German army adopted in 1916. By the end of 1916, early 1917, all of the units on the Western Front were equipped with heavy-duty helmets, which protected the head and the ears and the neck of the German soldier. They found that all of the armies in 1914 and 15, when they started doing statistical analysis, when there's a war, that they really started looking at numbers and started tackling things much better with record keeping, that 90% of the casualties are being taking guys out of the line and killing them or actually causing them damage. That's why the helmet is adopted by all armies. You'll see the British forming up and trying to get out of their lines. They're waiting right now for their tank support. The Allies, early on, with their tank support being a CA-1 Schneider tank, and the Schneider was the first operational military fighting vehicle that was developed that was fully tracked. Rotating turret on anything because they couldn't build anything stable enough. But they found that the 75 short barrel gun, they could drive up to the close to machine gun positions. When they opened up, they would blow the heck out of the machine gun position and destroy it, which they could take out the machine gun positions. That was a huge help to the infantry. You'll note on the side of the round bulbous looking thing, on either side of the tank there's a Hotchkiss machine gun. The idea was that you put up the machine gun positions, they would move up, and they would work that they'll just start making both sides of the track. The only problem with this early tank is it ran out of gasoline. And you got to find an artillery shell, a grenade, and you got hit by a river round. It was enough to set the gas tank ablaze or blow the entire thing to pieces in their artillery shell. The British got bogged down in the field as well because they're hitting heavy fire. There's guns trying to take out the machine gun position to move up. You see the blue uniforms, the French would support the British. Usually a piecemeal feature like you see this, where they only have a handful of tanks that would support the infantry. Oh, the tank got hit.
Uh-oh.
Like I said, there was a gasoline powered tank, so the first thing these guys usually wanted to do is get the heck out of there. They would try to bail out of the vehicle when they were left standing. But the horizons of the uniforms, they usually had a handful of guys that were supporting their own vehicles. So you have a Belgian troop, and then you have some of the French troops there. But the horizon blue is the standard uniform of the French army from the middle of the war until the end. But the British assault also bogged down, and they haven't been any further than the
Oh, what is in my eye with the sun?
In the process, they end up, both sides end up losing about a platoon to a company's worth of guys in the process of trying to come across this field. You can imagine this over the stretch of 15 to 20 miles, where the entire line from the move up at once in the exact same result, and the carnage that was spread along there. One of the issues is that this battlefield is pretty clean. There's only minimal barbed wire, but you can imagine a field that was prepared and hit with artillery for months or weeks in advance. This entire field would be nothing but a moose. In addition to that, you would have bodies strewn all over the place. As the artillery kept going back and forth, it wasn't like you could go out and just pick up the bodies. The bodies would sit there. They would putrefy in the sun. And as the artillery had to churn the bodies up in little tiny pieces. As the trenches moved and you dug in a new position, it was pretty common to actually dig down your new trenches and uncover all the bodies or pieces of bodies from the guys that had died in the previous spring or fall in the offensives. And this is the result of most of the battles that you see in front of you at the Battle of the Somme. Where it was a stalemate position. This was one of the main reasons why the Allies and the Germans tried very hard. It was a very technological war. In the development of aircraft, about every 6 months they were replacing aircraft with new ones because the old ones were obsolete because technology moved that fast. The tank technology also moved that fast. By the end of the war, the first modern tanks started to emerge with the Renault FT-17. But if they were lucky, they could recover some of the wounded. The rest of the wounded that they couldn't recover because they'd be shot down by snipers would sit there and they would eventually die. But this is a good example of what most of the battlefield in Somme Valley looked like in 1960. There's going to be another battle at 4 o'clock today. It'll be the Western Front featuring the Americans. And we'll go into some of the history of the Americans and their involvement later in the war. The war that you see in front of you is a European war. Wilson ran in 1960 for president on a platform of keeping the U.S. out of the war. Thank you very much for attending.
I can't see a damn thing either with my camera. So guys, if you guys, if I start like zooming in on the grass or some weird stuff, it's because I can't see well on the camera.
Did you? Oh, what am I doing? Fall down.
Somebody would open it up, easily accessible, and they would wrap your wound for you. Thank you very much. You go back to your trenches. So, we're going to see one of the final assaults in 1918 now. And during the first battle that the Americans were involved in, the first heavy battle where the Americans fought on their own, was the Battle of Cantigny. Many of you guys are familiar with the Cantigny Park Museum, which they have a display here with their Liberty truck. It's in Wheaton, Winfield, Illinois, in the Chicago suburbs. Awesome museum. Tells the story of the 1st Division. But they got involved in the first major battle at the Battle of Cantigny, a small farm town. And the first tanks that ever supported U.S. soldiers was the tank that will participate in this, which is a C-1 Snyder. The Americans also had no tanks, so they had to borrow them from the French and from the British. You're going to see the Germans start to move out in a trench raid where they're going to try to assault as quickly as they can in a surprise attack on the American trenches. The Russians capitulated and surrendered the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in early 1918 January, and that freed up hundreds of thousands of civilian German troops on the Russian front, but also to shift to the Western front. Their goal was to try to knock out the British and the French before the Americans could get enough troops in France to have a large enough expeditionary force to fight effectively. So there's the massive German attacks in March and April of 1918. In this tough year, they have the biggest battle of the year, the biggest battle of the fought at this time. Americans first got blooded in some of those battles fighting side by side with the French and the British. You can see that we launched the gas attack. And while the gas was launched at the Allies, you could never be too sure. The gas is actually drifting into the American lines, which originally they're trying to hit the Germans. One problem with the gas is that you're always at the mercy of the wind. The Germans have locked on in the field, leading out with machine gun fire and rifle fire, and they might not be able to advance much further. As you saw in the earlier battle, one of the things that they would do when they had an attack like this is they would immediately call in artillery from the field phones to drop in on the enemy lines. So they'll be dropping artillery pretty soon on the German lines. The Americans, when they got involved in fighting under their own command, starting with the Battle of Cantigny in April 1918, they continued all the way until November of 1918, and they lost about 500 and some thousand troops killed in action. There were several hundred thousand more, maybe up to 1 million were wounded. A lot of them were gas casualties that had long-term chronic conditions because of the gas attacks. And that was one of the reasons why the Veterans Administration today, the VA, was created to help tend to the wounds of hundreds of thousands of new U.S. veterans coming home that had been cared for chronically. A lot of these troops, while they weren't killed during the war, they died during the early years. Thousands and thousands of U.S. soldiers and veterans that died in the 20s and 30s and early 40s from results of the exposure to gas during the war. You can see the Germans pulling back, realizing they don't really have a chance of pushing any further. Usually what would happen in these circumstances is that the outside front line trenches from the other side had expended energy, taking casualties. Oh, here comes the artillery. There's battery and counter-battery fire. The Germans are counter-battery fire to try to suppress the American positions. The Americans are responding with trying to suppress the German positions and take out the machine gun positions. The Americans are going to get ready here, and they're probably going to launch a counterattack. So you see the CA-1 tank that's coming around, first tank designed and actually implemented in combat in 1916. By 1918, these tanks were relegated to second-line use, not as effective as some of the newer tanks that were developed. They were gasoline-powered tanks, so if they got a direct hit from artillery or grenades, a flamethrower, or even a mortar round, the relatively thin armor was good against bullets. It was not good against any sort of explosive.
So you're wrong.
It ignited the artillery shells for the light 75mm gun mounted on the side facing us, or if it ignited the gasoline fumes on the external fuel caps, the whole tank would blow up. You can see it fire against 75mm gun. Germans, fire. Got a couple guys go out and stamp it out. Fire, fire. Go, go. Don't put it out. So the tank has a 75mm short barrel gun. It was operated by an artilleryman, and it was meant to neutralize the machine gun positions. They would move up to the mobile box, and they would take out the machine guns, and they would move forward. You'll see that on the side of the tank, there's a Hotchkiss machine gun and a ball mount. That's on either side of the tank. the idea was that you could drive the tank up to a trench and then basically sweep the trench on either side of the tank to neutralize and pin down anybody who's left in the trench while the infantry swept in. They were used as infantry support vehicles. These were not designed for tank-on-tank battles.
Whoa!
By 1918, the British, the French, Germans, and their allies have been fighting for 4 years to put the war out, and they were very cautious. When the Americans came in, they were fresh, full of vigor, and they had not been exposed to the long-term war, the effects of seeing the maimed and wounded. They were fresh troops and weren't really quite sure what they were getting themselves into. And because of that, they threw caution to the wind off and were much more bold than the Germans and the French were in attacks, where they would take excessive casualties, whereas the other sides had already been through that in the fall of the 1916 and 1914 battles, and they were much more cautious than the Americans. You'll see the Americans take a little bit more of an initiative and charge. You have to keep in mind that these Germans, at this point in time, a lot of them are young. They had 16-year-olds that they were starting to call up because they were running out of 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds. They had draft ages that went all the way up in some classes to 40 years old. And reserves that had guys in their 50s and 60s even were being called up the whole sections of the line because they were literally running out of soldiers. You can see that the Germans are waving a white handkerchief, and a group of them are trying to surrender because they've just had enough and they don't want to get overrun, bayoneted, or shot. They knew that the war was over. They knew that the Allies were advancing by leaps and bounds. And when they had the opportunity to surrender and be able to not be shot, they would usually take that opportunity.
Oh, God.
The Americans will probably gear up here if they can, under some leadership, to try to do a final push on that pocket. On these last holdouts. In some cases, a lot of these guys might not realize because they're separated. The firing bayonets to them surrendered. And if they don't have direct line of sight or communications, there are pockets sometimes that were fighting, thinking that all their comrades were fighting alongside them on each side, and that might not have been the case. Especially if the Americans or the French were able to infiltrate one end, they would come up on that last pocket. And most of the time when faced with a bayonet charge and rifles being pointed at them, most of them would surrender. They're starting their mopping up operations now as that final pocket's getting surrounded. Having a tank at standby probably made these guys think twice about fighting as well. So that vigor, that energy that the Americans injected at the end, especially with fresh troops, really helped tip the scale for the Allies in winning World War I. One of the things that most people don't realize is in World War I, in 1918, fall of 1918 in 1918 is that the influenza hit. And while the 50 million people, 20 million people were killed during World War I from the fighting and famine and other reasons of the war, 50 million were killed by the influenza within 6 months in 1918. A lot of people attribute the influenza as also being one of the factors of the war coming to a grinding halt. Thank you very much for coming out today. We can't have anybody out in the field, but the reenactors will try to police up brass and bring it over to some of the kids on the spectator line. And enjoy the displays in the village, and the reenactors are always looking to do show and tell. Thank you very much for coming out.
It's all fun and games till somebody gets hurt. I don't do no battles anymore.
Since the Civil War, they only have 1 year. It was the army, the tank and the navy, and everybody else. Just put a red armband on the red.
Yeah, a lot of it. I think the guy with the pineapple pen out there with his butthead.
It's not World War I, unfortunately, Civil War. It sounded like there was no purpose for having those swaps.
Yes.
Yes,
Which is interesting too.
And they were all nice and shiny. That's why I put the covers on them.
They're not going yet.
No, and there's a tweet that came down. Could have had the big ones in, they were not fighting them at that. No, he's wrong. He's got a red cross on, look, and he's still man a machine gun. Yep. Well, they did a wrench one, didn't they? What did he do?
He spit on him.
Oh, dear. Well, he was wearing a red cross and his manual machine gun. It wasn't being very nice, was it?
So the English didn't do very well today.
He's gone for it. Oh no. Nah, they're going to shoot.
No. Somewhere they line them up, shot them. Don't do that. Public don't like to see that.
No, he's going to do it. No.
Oh no, they're going to kill him.
Take him out back, shoot him.
Yep.
Don't do it out here.
Yeah, that's it. Just hear the noises.
Yeah, you'll hear the shots here in a minute.
If they're going to be executed.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it?
Bit of donuts.
Yeah.
Apricot, custard.
That was the foreign squad.
Got executed.
Yeah.
Still laughing.
Oh, they killed one by one.
Execution.
There were 3 of them at back.
Why would you do them all at the same time?
Spotting squad. He's got a souvenir.
What are they doing?
Magic sponge, everybody comes to life.
Hello people, this is Big Bad Wolf, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. So I didn't make a outro yesterday, but I'm making it now. So this is the outro for the World War I reenactment. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the World War I reenactment. It's currently raining outside and I just got home, so yeah, my hair is a little bit messed up now thanks to the fucking rain. Damn fucking rain. Because I just got done from working out. But, yeah. Also, another news. I have fucking sunburnt. You can't really tell well here. But trust me, if you look closely, my skin is red. And I have it all around here. You can see it. Like right there. I am sunburnt from the World War I reenactment. So, sucks. But, other than that, we're good. So if you guys enjoyed the World War I video, make sure to give this a like. Make sure to also subscribe to join the Almighty Wolf Army. And don't forget to also join the Almighty Wolf Army Discord chat to talk to your fellow Wolf members. This is Big Bad Wolf. I'll see you guys later. Bye.